Right then, pull up a chair, grab a pint, or a cup of tea if you're feeling proper, and let me tell you about Charlotte Corday. Now, most folks, if they know her at all, know her as the woman who stuck a knife into Jean-Paul Marat while he was having a nice soak in his tub. But oh, there's more to it than just a bloody bath, isn't there? This lass was a force, a proper Spartan in a petticoat, trying to steer a revolution that had gone well and truly off the rails. See Charlotte Corday, born Marie-Anne Charlotte Corday d'Armont. She wasn't some back alley brawler. No, she was from a minor noble family, educated in a convent in Caen. And she had a head full of high-minded ideals from reading the likes of Plutarch, all about ancient Roman and Greek heroes sacrificing themselves for the greater good. She was a Republican, through and through, but the kind who believed in a bit of law and order, not a bloodbath. Now, the French Revolution, eh? Started off with all that liberty, equality, fraternity jazz, everyone's buzzing, feeling proper chuffed. But then, it all started to get a bit stabby. And Jean-Paul Marat, the man she'd eventually send to the great beyond, he was one of the loudest voices pushing for all that stabby business. He was a journalist, right? Ran a paper called L'Ami du Peuple, the friend of the people. Except his idea of friendship involved a lot of guillotining and denouncing anyone who didn't agree with him as an enemy of the revolution. A real firebrand, that one, with a pen that dripped venom and a voice that stirred up the Parisian mobs. Charlotte back in Caen. She's watching all this unfold with a growing sense of dread. She was a Girondin sympathizer, you see. Now the Girondins were another revolutionary faction, a bit more moderate, wanted a constitutional republic, not the wild, uncontrolled chaos the Jacobins, with Marat at their forefront, were brewing. When the Jacobins started purging the Girondins, arresting them, executing them, sending them fleeing to places like Caen, that's when Charlotte really started to simmer. She was horrified by the September massacres, where thousands of prisoners were slaughtered. She saw Marat as the architect of all this escalating violence, the real villain who was dragging the revolution, her beloved republic, down into the muck. So this quiet, thoughtful young woman, with her head full of classical heroism, she starts thinking, someone needs to do something. Someone needs to be that Roman hero, that Spartan, who makes the ultimate sacrifice to save the Republic. And she, Charlotte Corday, decides she's the one. She packed her bags, said a vague goodbye to her aunt, told her she was off to England, because, you know, can't be living in such a violent country, wink wink, and headed for Paris. She arrives in Paris July 1793. Her initial grand plan? To assassinate Marat in front of the entire National Convention, make a dramatic public statement. A real showstopper. But turns out Marat, bless his cotton socks, was suffering from a dreadful skin condition that kept him mostly confined to his home, often in his medicinal bath. So no grand public spectacle for Charlotte. Plan B it was then, a more intimate, shall we say, encounter. She buys a kitchen knife, about 6 inches of cold steel, from a shop. Then she starts trying to get an audience with Marat. Twice she's turned away by his fiancée, Simon Evrard, who was, quite rightly, a bit suspicious of this persistent young woman. But Charlotte Corday, she was determined. She sends a note to Marat, claiming she has vital information about Girondin traitors in Caen. Marat, ever keen to get names for his next round of denunciations, bites. On July 13th, 1793, she gets her audience. Marat is in his bath, as usual, a cloth wrapped around his head, writing down the names of the traitors Charlotte is supposedly giving him. And by the way, get this. When Jacques-Louis David, the famous painter, immortalized Marat's death, he depicted him holding a note that was not an actual quote from Corday, but a fictional expression of what she might have said. Art, eh? Sometimes it's a bit of a fib. Anyway, Marat is scribbling away, completely oblivious, and Charlotte, with a swift, decisive move, pulls out her knife and plunges it straight into his chest. He cried out, "Aidez-moi, ma chère amie! Help me, my dear friend!" And that was it. Jean-Paul Marat, the firebrand, the voice of the Jacobin terror, was no more. She didn't try to flee, not a chance. She just stood there, calm as you like, ready for what was next. She was immediately arrested, of course. At her trial, she was as cool as a cucumber. They tried to link her to a wider Girondin conspiracy, but she held firm. I alone conceived the plan and executed it. She called Marat a hoarder and a monster, and her justification. I have killed one man to save 100,000. A bold claim, wasn't it? She truly believed that by removing this one man, she would halt the escalating violence and bring peace back to France. Now, let's have a quick natter about the ethics and strategy of all this, eh? From a core identity perspective, Charlotte Corday's actions are fascinating. Did she have moral clarity? Absolutely. In her mind, she was acting with a crystal clear purpose: to stop what she saw as tyranny and save the revolution from itself. Her integrity, from her own viewpoint, was unimpeachable. She truly believed she was doing the right thing, a virtuous act for the common good. But what were the trade-offs? The trade-offs. She hoped to end the violence, but what actually happened? Marat became a martyr. The Jacobins, instead of being cowed, doubled down on the reign of terror, demonizing the Girondins even further and leading to even more executions. Her noble sacrifice, her attempt to reset the revolution, ended up fueling the very fire she sought to extinguish. It was a classic example of unintended consequences, where a singular dramatic action, however well-intentioned, fails to account for the complex, chaotic reality of a revolution. Was it a stroke of genius or madness? A bit of both, perhaps, but certainly not the grand solution she envisioned. It highlighted the grim reality that one person's radical solution can often be another's justification for even greater brutality. Charlotte Corday was found guilty, and just 4 days after she plunged that knife into Marat, she went to the guillotine on July 17th, 1793. Accounts say she faced her death with immense bravery and dignity. Before her execution, she even asked an artist, Hauer, to paint her portrait. Her legacy? It's a proper mixed bag. To the Jacobins, she was a monster, a counter-revolutionary fiend. To those who opposed the terror, she became a martyr, the angel of assassination, as the writer Alphonse de Lamartine famously called her. Her act, while failing to achieve its immediate political goal, absolutely challenged the perception of women in the revolution. Here was a woman, not just reacting, but planning a political murder and carrying it out alone. It forced people to reckon with the idea that women could have their own political convictions and agency, even if many female revolutionaries at the time distanced themselves from her actions, fearing it would harm their cause. So, Charlotte Corday, the noblewoman who dared to play hero, to step onto the stage of history with a kitchen knife and a grand, albeit ultimately flawed vision. She tried to save a revolution, and in doing so, became one of its most enigmatic and tragic figures. Stay curious, stay sharp, and stay just sober enough to remember it all. This was just a swig of history, and if it wasn't in your textbook, it bloody well should have been. And before you go, do a brother fav and like, share, and subscribe.